Hello, this is Pastor Terry Goodman, and I want to welcome you to the Wesleyan Connection. This podcast is primarily for the clergy and laity of the Holston Annual Conference. Join with me now as I take a look around the Connection and share some of the things happening in the churches of our annual conference. Have you ever been involved in a conversation that you really didn't want to end because things just seemed to be going so well, and you really wished your other friends had been there to be a part of it? Hi, this is Pastor Terry Goodman, and this is the Wesleyan Connection. This is an occasional podcast. I'm trying to do it 3 times a week. We'll see how well I can hold that schedule up. That is aimed at the ministers and the lay folk of the Holston Annual Conference, as well as anybody that might want to listen in. I'm going to be looking at issues that maybe are more specific to our annual conference. Right now, I'm looking at issues that we're dealing with in the Big Stone Gap District. And in this particular episode, our District Superintendent is starting to try to wrap up this conversation that has meandered over the past, several episodes. This is episode 7 in Conversations with a District Superintendent. And we began to try to put some closure to the time that we've had together. Hope you enjoy it.
How do we transform this conversation, which is rich, to the others outside of this room?
Podcast. No. I've got 7 or 8 good little podcasts going here.
Hey,
I think we develop intentional open-ended questions, and we start with one, and whoever, not you in October, but Jackie or whoever says this is going to be the starting point, and then we as moderators just go where the because that's what we've done today, is just gone where the conversation
this has been healthy. This is one of the best conversations I've had since I've been in the district, I'll be honest with you. And I think this is what we need. Because you're right. A lot of times we accentuate the negatives.
Yep.
Like my response to that person, that one person was, "Did your kids sit still?" Because I don't know any kids that have ever sat politely still in church unless they were just unless it was the Catholic Church with a nun standing over with a ruler.
They remember them as sitting still, though. That's how they really do remember their children. Their children was a perfect little child. Now, everybody else remembers their child different, but they remember that my child acted right in church.
So what are some of the questions?
That's
I think that's the challenge for this group.
Yeah.
Is what are some of the questions?
I really like that particular idea because, while I went into mine and I basically just said, here's the 2 questions I want to ask. How is it with your soul and how is it with your church? And I mean, it went really well. But with that said, if we had some questions, if I had thought about the question that y'all asked, I probably would have asked that one, but I couldn't remember it. But if there is a question that's asked,
I thought that was the
like
question.
It probably was. I just couldn't remember it. I'm sitting there in the meeting going, okay, I'm supposed to lead these people here in a few minutes.
Well, my question that, like Ray and I talked about, is what can we do that's in common? But our churches already it's easy, already do things in common. But the other churches like Dungannon that doesn't participate, and you've got Hortons and Three Bells that really don't participate either. It's like, what common ministry or what commonness can we find? Because like Ray's got youth, but I don't. And I said, we may have to look at stepping outside the box. I was talking about doing the mission buckets, doing a common mission, doing because we all used to do Relay for Life, all 3 3 circuits. You know what I'm saying? Trying to find the commonness, I guess, would be to where we can.
I think it's a good question.
Yeah.
I'd wait on that particular question until later on in the year.
Well, I can do that with Ray because we're
and I think it's a question that really needs to be asked. But I think right now we need to be asking.
Well, I think the questions that has been asked today here, I think we need to ask the people in our group, and to begin with, okay. I mean, we can do it a lot of different ways, but one of the things we can ask, how do we really? And one of the things that stuck out to me is, how do we organize ourselves to transform lives? What does it mean to make disciples? And one of the things that stuck out to me is, how do we really organize ourselves to transform lives? What does it mean to organize ourselves to transform lives? What does it mean to organize ourselves to transform lives? What does it mean to make disciples? How do we organize ourselves to transform lives? What does it mean to make disciples? And one of the things that stuck out to me is, how do we really organize ourselves to transform lives? What does it mean to make disciples? How do we organize ourselves to transform lives? What does it mean to make disciples? And one of the things that stuck out to me is, how do we really organize ourselves to transform lives? What does it mean to make disciples? How do we organize ourselves to transform lives? What does it mean to make disciples? And one of the things that stuck out to me is, how do we really organize ourselves to transform lives? What does it mean to make disciples? How do we organize ourselves to transform lives? What does it mean to make disciples? And one of the things that stuck out to me is How do we make disciples? And I think the pastors need to ask that so they can ask their church. How are we building relationships? When we think about how are we building relationships, we talk about transforming the world, but how are we transforming the world? How are we transforming lives in our community? And they may share some wonderful stories like we've heard today. What does discipleship really look and mean to you? I think we need to look at worship. Talk to them about worship. How do you organize worship, and how would the community want worship organized?
What metrics are important?
Yeah,
that we need to measure so we can evaluate our ministry instead of having metrics as forced on us.
Well, that's what we talked about last night, was how we, as a community, St. Charles, Robbins Chapel, Pennington Gap, how we can effectively come together and rather than worship separately, worship corporately.
I think we really need to hammer down on the celebrations. Because so many times I hear talking to pastors, and what I hear the most is negatives, and I hear a lot of negatives from churches and church members. So how do we celebrate? What do we celebrate? I mean, take a look around and what do you say? What do you have to celebrate? I mean, that's what I've gotten out here, and then to begin to share, I think then that will foster more conversation, and I think it'll open up, and then I think from that, then it'll start. People will say, we do this and this, and then we may be able to say, it was like Jackie was talking about the differences between her churches and Ray Dockery's. But there's somewhere along the line, and all that and all that ground, and all the relationships that you all established, somewhere along that you're going to say, well, you know what, I have this. Let me share that with you, and I think we'll be able to do that.
And I think Beth's talking about the starting with the why. Mm-hmm. I think about our interview is that. With Christmas card, I got around to the why at the end. But, how much stronger it would have been to have started with that story of the why.
So now you got to redo your interview.
It'll go as printed.
But, I don't want to lose that starting with the why. And the
I will email all of you that link.
Why has all the difficulties in that?
Yeah.
Now, I'm trying my best to quit using church talk and to get the congregation, when they're talking to people, to quit using church talk. Mm-hmm. Just like the discipleship, how do we do discipleship? I refuse to use that term anymore because it is totally meaningless to the laity.
Yeah.
But if you talk about the same thing by saying, how do we do relationships with the community, which is making disciples in the community, they understand that. Mm-hmm. And doing the relationships gets right back, because if you build the relationships, they will come into the church. If you don't build the relationships, they won't. And I've got congregation that's not good at building relationships with the community. They're a lot better than they used to be, but they're not good.
Yeah.
Well, but for so long we've not had to do that. It's like we open the doors, or the old adage, if we build it, they will come. Well, that's not true anymore. But and plus, people are suspicious, and I always think when I think of the building a relationship, and how uncomfortable we are, and every one of us has been in an uncomfortable situation. But think about the woman who came in to Simon's house to anoint Jesus. Mm-hmm. That was an uncomfortable environment, and we have a ton of people that are uncomfortable. But you also have churches that are uncomfortable about going into the environment. Mm-hmm. I think there's a variety of ways of doing that, but more importantly, just, because people are going to look at it, if they know you're a preacher or a church member, they expect you to say, I want you to come to church. But if you sit down and find out who they are and what their interest is, and in the Gate City area, if you talk football, soccer, or volleyball, then you're in. But seriously, find out where they are. Find out who they are.
I think that goes back to I want you to care about me and not about my money or my presence or my fill in the blank.
And the other thing is that when you do that, the other stuff will come.
Yeah. Absolutely.
When they know you care about them, then they'll care about the other things.
This is Pastor Goodman. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Wesleyan Connection. Be sure to check back often for more podcasts.